Dr. Marcus Webb stood in his cramped laboratory at the Interspecies Educational Consortium, staring at the three most insufferable students the galaxy had ever produced. After 23 years of teaching xenobiology to Earth's brightest minds, he thought he'd seen every possible combination of arrogance and stupidity. He was wrong. "Welcome to Earth Biology 101, Marcus said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses with the resignation of a man who'd already mentally updated his retirement plans. "I'm Dr. Webb, and for the next semester, I'll be your guide through what your species apparently consider the quaint primitive ecosystems of our little blue planet." The first student, Zephron, looked like someone had taught a chandelier to be condescending. His crystalline body refracted light in patterns that somehow managed to convey smugness. When he spoke, his voice resonated like wind chimes having an argument. "Dr. Webb," Zephron chimed, "I must express my confusion about this curriculum. On Crystallis Prime, our silicon-based organisms have evolved beyond such crude biological functions as your carbon-based lifeforms display. Why study the primitive when one can observe the perfected?" Sitting beside him, Quilara made a sound that was either agreement or the noise her amphibian ancestors made when choking on pond scum. Her mottled green skin glistened with what Marcus hoped was just natural moisture and not the smugness literally oozing from her pores. "Indeed," she gurgled, her voice like a sophisticated frog clearing its throat. "On Aquatica 7, our organisms communicate through advanced telepathic networks. These Earth creatures seem to operate on mere chemical signals. How delightfully rustic." The third member of this intellectual disaster trio was Blex, whose metallic humanoid form somehow managed to look bored, despite having no discernible facial features. When he spoke, his voice carried the tinny quality of someone talking through a very expensive trash can. "My homeworld of Ferris Beta has organisms that manipulate electromagnetic fields for survival," Blex announced with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. "I fail to see what these Earth insects could possibly teach advanced beings such as ourselves." Marcus felt his left eye develop the twitch that had started the day these three arrived. He'd specifically requested the exchange program to broaden his students' perspectives. Instead, he'd gotten the galactic equivalent of trust fund kids on a slumming expedition. "Well then," Marcus said, pulling up his lesson plan with the grim determination of a general planning a siege, "I think we'll start with something that might surprise you. Your first assignment will be a comprehensive study of Earth's arthropod species, with particular emphasis on social insects and their defensive mechanisms." Zephron's crystalline structure actually sparkled with what Marcus could only interpret as amusement. "Social insects? You mean those tiny creatures that mindlessly follow simple pheromone trails? This should be educational." Marcus smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a man who'd spent decades watching overconfident students learn that the universe had a sense of humor, and it wasn't always kind. "Oh yes," he said, making a note in his files. "Very educational indeed." The following week, Marcus watched his three alien students examine Earth insect specimens with all the enthusiasm of food critics forced to review gas station sushi. Their first lab session had devolved into what could only be described as an interspecies roast session, with Earth's arthropods as the unwilling targets. "Observe this worker ant," Zephron announced, his crystalline finger pointing at a preserved fire ant with theatrical disdain. "On Crystallis Prime, our resonance beetles communicate through harmonic frequencies that can coordinate activities across entire continents. These Earth ants rely on crude chemical trails like savages painting on cave walls." Quilara, who had been poking at a butterfly wing with scientific instruments, made her signature throat-clearing noise. "How primitive. Our mind-link swimmers on Aquatica 7 share collective consciousness across oceanic distances. Meanwhile, these Earth insects appear to operate on individual instinct with minimal group coordination. It's almost tragic, really." Marcus bit his tongue so hard he was surprised it didn't bleed. These three had clearly never heard of superorganisms' swarm intelligence or the fact that some ant colonies had been solving complex logistical problems for millions of years before their civilizations had figured out fire. Blex, meanwhile, had been examining a preserved wasp with the kind of scientific rigor usually reserved for checking if milk had gone bad. "The defensive capabilities of these creatures are laughably inadequate," he droned, his metallic voice somehow managing to sound even more bored than usual. "Our Ferris Guardians can generate electromagnetic pulses capable of disabling starship navigation systems. What can these tiny Earth insects possibly do? Bite you with their microscopic mandibles?" The three aliens erupted in what Marcus assumed was laughter, though Zephron sounded like wind chimes in a hurricane. Quilara like a garbage disposal with hiccups, and Blex like a computer trying to clear its cache. "You find Earth's insects amusing," Marcus said, his voice carrying the dangerous calm of a man who'd just decided to abandon all professional restraint. Let me ask you something, have any of you actually encountered a living specimen of what you're so eager to dismiss? Encountered. Zephron's voice rose to a pitch that made nearby glassware nervous. Dr. Webb, we are advanced beings from civilizations that have mastered interstellar travel. I hardly think we need to fear creatures that can be eliminated with a simple atmospheric adjustment. Quilara nodded vigorously, her amphibian head bobbing with certainty. Precisely. Our environmental suits are designed to handle the harsh vacuum of space. What possible threat could Earth's microscopic fauna present to beings of our technological sophistication? Blex didn't even look up from his examination. I've survived magnetic storms that would liquefy organic matter. I think I can handle whatever Earth's insect kingdom has to offer. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Maybe it was his professional dignity reasserting itself. Maybe it was 23 years of dealing with know-it-all students finally reaching a breaking point. Or maybe it was just the caffeine from his fourth cup of coffee that morning finally kicking in. Gentlemen, he said, though the term felt generous. I think it's time for some hands-on field experience. Field experience. Quilara's voice carried a note of excitement. You mean we'll finally get to observe these creatures in their natural habitat? How wonderfully quaint. Oh, you'll get to observe them all right. Marcus said, pulling up files on his computer with the methodical precision of a man loading ammunition. In fact, I think direct interaction might be exactly what your education is missing. Zephron's crystalline structure literally sparkled with anticipation. Direct interaction with Earth insects. Dr. Webb, this is almost too generous. We'll finally be able to demonstrate the vast superiority of our evolutionary paths. Marcus smiled again. This time it was the smile of a man who just realized that sometimes the universe hands you exactly the teaching moment you need, wrapped in a bow made of pure delicious irony. Trust me, he said, already mentally preparing the field study authorization forms, this is going to be an experience none of you will ever forget. 3 days later, Marcus led his trio of overconfident extraterrestrials through the climate-controlled corridors of the university's entomological research facility. The building hummed with the quiet efficiency of a place where very smart people studied very small things that could, under the right circumstances, ruin your entire day. Welcome to what we humans like to call the bug house, Marcus announced with the cheerful tone of a tour guide leading visitors into a haunted mansion. Today we'll be conducting what's known as an immersive behavioral study. The facility's director, Dr. Patricia Hayes, met them at the security checkpoint with the kind of professional smile that suggested she'd rather be literally anywhere else. Dr. Webb, I have to say, when you submitted the request for supervised interaction with the Paraponera clavata colony, I thought there might have been some kind of clerical error. No error, Marcus replied, signing the liability waivers with flourishes that bordered on artistic. My students here have expressed considerable confidence in their ability to handle Earth's arthropod species. I thought we'd start them off with something educational. Zephron's crystalline body refracted the fluorescent lighting as he examined the facility's containment systems. Paraponera clavata, the nomenclature suggests nothing particularly threatening. I assume this is some sort of standard earth beetle or perhaps a small flying insect. Dr. Hayes blinked twice, the way people do when they're trying to process something fundamentally absurd. You don't know what a bullet ant is. Should we? Quilara gurgled, her amphibian features arranged in what might have been curiosity or mild indigestion. On Aquatica 7, we catalog threats by their telepathic resonance frequencies. If these creatures don't register on our psychic sensors, they're hardly worth our concern. Blex, meanwhile, had been examining the reinforced glass enclosures with the detached interest of someone window shopping for paperweights. These containment protocols seem excessive for such diminutive organisms. Our ferrous guardian insects require electromagnetic dampening fields and titanium alloy barriers. These Earth specimens appear to be held by simple transparent barriers. Marcus and Dr. Hayes exchanged a look that contained approximately 17 different warnings, none of which the aliens seemed capable of interpreting. The bullet ant, Dr. Hayes explained with the patience of someone who'd clearly given this speech before, possesses what is widely considered to be the most painful insect sting in the known universe. The pain is so intense that it's been compared to being shot, hence the name. The indigenous peoples of Central America have traditionally used bullet ant stings as initiation rites because the experience is so profoundly character-building. How delightfully primitive, Zephron chimed, his voice carrying all the concern of someone discussing the weather. I'm certain our advanced physiologies will find such crude biological warfare mechanisms quite manageable. Quilara nodded sagely. Indeed, our amphibian ancestors evolved in environments with far more sophisticated toxins than anything these simple Earth insects could produce. This should provide an excellent opportunity to demonstrate our species' evolutionary superiority. Marcus felt his professional ethics and his desire to watch these three learn some humility engage in what could only be described as philosophical combat. His desire to watch them learn humility won by a landslide. "Excellent," he said, pulling on safety equipment with the slow deliberation of someone performing a sacred ritual. "Dr. Hayes, would you be so kind as to prepare the observation chamber?" "Are you absolutely certain about this, Doctor?" Hayes asked, though she was already moving toward the containment area. "The liability forms are quite comprehensive, but I feel obligated to mention that we've never had non-terrestrial subjects participate in this type of study." "All the more reason to expand our research parameters," Marcus replied. "Science is all about pushing boundaries, isn't it?" The three aliens practically vibrated with excitement as they approached the bullet ant habitat. Through the reinforced glass, they could see what appeared to be a perfectly ordinary collection of large dark ants going about their perfectly ordinary ant business. "These are your feared Earth warriors?" Blex asked, his metallic voice somehow managing to convey disappointment. "They appear to be engaged in standard foraging behavior. Where are the electromagnetic pulses, the defensive formations, the coordinated attack patterns?" "Oh," Marcus said, handing each of them a clipboard with observation forms they'd never get the chance to fill out. "You'll see those soon enough." As Dr. Hayes began the final safety briefing that the aliens would systematically ignore, Marcus allowed himself one last moment of professional satisfaction. In his 23-year career, he'd never had the opportunity to teach a lesson quite this memorable. He was about to make educational history. The bullet ant observation chamber was a marvel of scientific engineering designed to allow researchers to study one of nature's most potent pain delivery systems in relative safety. The key phrase being relative safety, which assumed the researchers in question possessed basic survival instincts and a healthy respect for evolutionary biochemistry. The three alien students possessed neither. "The containment protocols seem rather theatrical," Zephron observed as Dr. Hayes sealed them into the chamber with the ants. His crystalline body sparkled with confidence as he examined the colony through the interior barriers. "Surely these primitive organisms pose no significant threat to advanced extraterrestrial physiology." Marcus watched through the observation window with the anticipation of a man about to witness natural selection in real time. "Remember, this is purely observational. Do not under any circumstances make direct contact with the specimens." "Of course not," Quilara gurgled dismissively. "We're scientists, not barbarians. We'll simply document their crude behavioral patterns and demonstrate how our superior evolutionary adaptations render their defensive mechanisms irrelevant." What happened next would be studied by xenobiologists for decades to come, though the official reports would be significantly more diplomatic than Marcus's personal notes, which began with the phrase, "I tried to warn the idiotic space tourists." Blex, in an act of scientific hubris that would have impressed even the most arrogant human graduate student, decided to test the primitive Earth insect's response to electromagnetic stimulation. He extended his metallic finger toward the habitat barrier, generating what he assumed was a harmless electromagnetic pulse. The bullet ants, who had been going about their peaceful ant business, suddenly found their environment flooded with an unfamiliar energy signature. Their response was immediate, coordinated, and absolutely terrifying in its efficiency. "Fascinating," Blex announced, completely missing the fact that several dozen ants were now moving toward his position with the focused intensity of tiny six-legged guided missiles. "They appear to be exhibiting some sort of basic electromagnetic sensitivity. How charmingly rudimentary." The first ant to reach the barrier began what Marcus would later describe in his incident report as standard defensive pheromone release. What he wrote in his personal journal was considerably more colorful and involved several words that would have made his grandmother reach for her wooden spoon. "Oh look," Zephron chimed, leaning closer to observe the ant's behavior. "It seems to be releasing some sort of chemical signal. Probably a primitive communication method to alert the colony of our presence." In fact, the ant was doing exactly that, but the communication being sent was less. "Hey everyone, look at these weird things and more. Code red, deploy all units, unleash hell." The barrier between the observation area and the ant habitat featured a small ventilation system designed to maintain proper atmospheric conditions. It was not designed to prevent determined ants from squeezing through mesh openings that had seemed perfectly adequate until this exact moment. The first bullet ant to make it through the ventilation system landed directly on Zephron's crystalline shoulder with the precision of a sniper hitting a target from 3 kilometers away. For approximately half a second, nothing happened. Zephron continued his scientific observations, completely unaware that he was about to become a case study in interspecies pain management. Then the ant stung him. The sound that emerged from Zephron's crystalline form was unlike anything Marcus had heard in his entire career. It wasn't quite a scream, wasn't quite the sound of glass breaking, and wasn't quite the noise a cathedral organ makes when struck by lightning, but it somehow managed to incorporate all three into one sustained note of pure crystallized agony. Interesting physiological response. Quilara observed with academic detachment, right up until the second ant landed on her amphibian back and introduced her to the wonders of bullet ant venom coursing through highly sensitive skin designed for aquatic environments. Her scream was more traditional but no less impressive, sounding like a foghorn having an existential crisis. Blex, whose metallic composition made him an excellent conductor for both electromagnetic fields and, as it turned out, the neurological chaos induced by bullet ant venom, received his education when the third ant decided his finger looked like an excellent place to deliver a graduate-level lesson in earth biochemistry. The sound he made was purely electronic, a series of alarm tones, error beeps, and what might have been the mechanical equivalent of sobbing. Marcus watched through the observation window as three of the galaxy's most arrogant lifeforms discovered that evolution doesn't care about your technological sophistication when you're dealing with millions of years of refined chemical warfare. Should we do something? Dr. Hayes asked, though she seemed to be fighting her own battle between professional obligation and scientific curiosity. Oh, we should definitely do something, Marcus replied, pulling out his phone to record what was rapidly becoming the most educational 14 seconds in xenobiological history. We should document this for posterity. The three aliens were now engaged in what could generously be called a tactical retreat, but looked more like a panic-induced interpretive dance performance. They bounced off walls, tripped over each other, and generated sounds that would require new categories in acoustic taxonomy. The fascinating thing about bullet ant venom, Marcus narrated for his recording, is how it interacts with different nervous system architectures. Note how each species is experiencing the pain in ways uniquely adapted to their particular evolutionary weaknesses. Through the chaos, he could hear Zephron's crystalline voice cracking with something that might have been newfound respect. Make it stop, make it stop. How is something so small causing so much? The rest was lost in harmonics that probably violated several noise ordinances. Now that Marcus said with deep professional satisfaction, is what we call a learning experience. The Interspecies Medical Center had seen its share of unusual cases since Earth joined the galactic community, but nothing quite prepared the staff for three alien students, writhing in agony, while muttering what sounded like prayers to various deity equivalents in languages that made the universal translator smoke. Dr. Amara Okonkwo, chief of Xenological Emergency Medicine, stood over her three patients with the expression of someone who'd just discovered that her medical degree hadn't adequately prepared her for this particular Tuesday. Let me get this straight, she said, reviewing the intake forms with growing disbelief. Three advanced extraterrestrial beings, each from civilizations capable of interstellar travel, were incapacitated by a single ant species native to Central America. Not just any ant species, Marcus corrected from his position by the observation window, where he'd been taking notes with the dedication of a researcher who'd just stumbled onto the discovery of a lifetime. Paraponera clavata, commonly known as the bullet ant, and technically, it was 3 ants, 1 per customer. Zephron, whose crystalline form was currently flickering between 17 different shades of pain-induced color changes, managed to produce a sound that might have been words if words could be made of pure suffering. The agony. It resonates through my entire molecular structure. How is this possible from such a primitive organism? His vital signs, displayed on monitors that had required significant calibration to read crystalline life forms, showed patterns that the medical staff had initially mistaken for equipment malfunction, until they realized they were looking at the physiological signature of someone whose entire nervous system was basically screaming in harmonic frequencies. Quilara was faring no better. Her amphibian physiology, optimized for aquatic environments, had proven spectacularly unsuited for terrestrial chemical warfare. Every mucus gland in her body was working overtime, producing what Dr. Okonkwo could only describe as stress slime, while her patient generated a continuous low-frequency moan that made everyone in the medical bay slightly nauseous. The pain receptors, Quilara gurgled between waves of agony, they're designed for aquatic toxins, not this terrestrial nightmare fuel. Why didn't anyone warn us that Earth insects were actually weapons of mass destruction? We did, Marcus pointed out helpfully. Several times. You just assumed we were being paranoid because we're primitive carbon-based lifeforms with inadequate evolutionary development. Blex was perhaps the most fascinating case from a medical standpoint. His metallic physiology meant that the bullet ant venom was interacting with his nervous system in ways that created feedback loops of pain. Every time he tried to recalibrate his pain management systems, the venom triggered new pathways of agony. Error. Pain threshold exceeded by factor of, sweet merciful circuits, make it stop. Blex's voice had devolved into a series of electronic hiccups punctuated by what sounded like a computer trying to cry. My homeworld's military-grade pain suppressors are useless against this biochemical terrorism. Dr. Okonkwo turned to Marcus with the look of someone who desperately needed context. How long does this typically last in human subjects? Oh, about 4 to 6 hours for the peak intensity, Marcus replied cheerfully. Though the residual effects can linger for up to 24 hours. The indigenous peoples who use bullet ant stings in initiation ceremonies call it 24 hours of pure life. Very poetic, really. The sound that emerged from all three patients simultaneously could only be described as the harmony of despair performed by a very avant-garde alien choir. Word of the incident had spread through the galactic academic community with the speed that only truly spectacular educational disasters can achieve. Within hours, the medical bay had accumulated a growing audience of alien students, professors and researchers, all drawn by morbid curiosity and the universal appeal of watching overconfident beings receive cosmic comeuppance. Dr. Korath, a prominent educator from the Rigel system, peered through the observation window with what Marcus assumed was the alien equivalent of fascination. These Earth insects, they're being studied as potential defensive applications throughout the outer colonies now. 3 students from advanced civilizations, incapacitated by creatures weighing less than a gram. It's remarkable. Professor Vexhai from the Centauri Institute had arrived with a full research team and was taking detailed scans of the patients. The tactical implications are staggering, she announced to anyone within hearing range. If Earth's smallest organisms can neutralize beings with our level of technological advancement, what does that suggest about their larger fauna? Marcus felt obligated to interject. Well, you probably don't want to learn about our wasps, spiders, or that thing we call the Australian box jellyfish. The collective shudder that ran through the assembled alien academics was clearly visible even across species barriers. Zephron, who had finally managed to achieve something resembling coherent speech, addressed the growing crowd of observers with the humility of someone whose entire worldview had been reconstructed by a creature smaller than his smallest appendage. Fellow academics, he resonated weakly, I must formally retract my previous assessments of Earth's arthropod species. These organisms represent a level of biochemical sophistication that our preliminary observations completely failed to recognize. Quilara nodded vigorously from her position on the medical bed, though the motion seemed to cause her additional distress. The complexity of their defensive systems. It's not primitive at all. It's elegantly evolved for maximum effectiveness against a wide range of potential threats. We were idiots. Blex managed to contribute his own electronic wheeze of agreement. Recommend immediate revision of threat assessment protocols for all Earth fauna. Classification upgrade from harmless primitive organisms to circuits. It still hurts. To approach with extreme caution and considerable respect. Dr. Okonkwo reviewed their latest medical scans with growing professional interest. The good news is that the venom appears to be non-lethal to your species, though the pain response is clearly comprehensive. You should make full recoveries within the standard recovery time frame. How long? All 3 patients asked simultaneously. About 24 hours, she replied. The harmony of despair resumed, this time with what might have been resignation mixed in with the agony. Marcus made another note in his research journal. Tomorrow's xenobiology lecture was going to be very, very interesting. 6 weeks later, Marcus stood in the same laboratory where this educational odyssey had begun, watching 3 fundamentally changed alien students prepare their final presentations. The transformation was so complete that he occasionally had to remind himself. These were the same beings who had once dismissed Earth's insects as quaint primitive organisms. The recovery period had been, to put it mildly, enlightening for everyone involved. Zephron, whose crystalline structure now seemed to flicker with something that looked suspiciously like humility, had spent his convalescence diving deep into the literature on social insect behavior. His research notes, which Marcus had been allowed to review, read like the work of someone who'd experienced a religious conversion through the medium of small arthropod-delivered agony. The organizational complexity of a single ant colony, Zephron had written in his careful, resonant script, exceeds the computational requirements of most interstellar navigation systems. Their chemical communication networks demonstrate efficiency parameters that our most advanced silicon-based organisms have yet to achieve. I have been profoundly mistaken in my initial assessments. Quilara had undergone her own intellectual metamorphosis during recovery. Her amphibian fascination with Earth's insects had evolved from dismissive curiosity to something approaching genuine awe. She'd requested access to the university's entire entomological database, and had spent sleepless nights cataloging defensive mechanisms that made her homeworld's telepathic organisms look positively primitive by comparison. The biochemical precision required to create compounds that can incapacitate beings from entirely different evolutionary trees, she had gurgled excitedly to anyone who would listen, suggests levels of adaptive sophistication that challenge our fundamental assumptions about consciousness and intentional design in lower-order species. Blex, perhaps most remarkably, had discovered what could only be described as passion. His metallic form, once rigid with technological superiority, now moved with the animated enthusiasm of someone who'd found their calling. He'd been corresponding with myrmecologists across 3-star systems, sharing data about his pain response patterns and their implications for understanding cross-species neurological compatibility. My homeworld's military applications division, he had confided to Marcus during one of his follow-up appointments, has requested detailed reports on Earth's arthropod defensive capabilities. Apparently, the strategic implications of organisms that can neutralize advanced beings through purely biological mechanisms have captured significant attention in our defense sectors. Now, as Marcus prepared to hear their final presentations, he reflected on the peculiar satisfaction that came from watching universal principles assert themselves across species barriers. Pride, as it turned out, really did go before a fall, regardless of what planet you were from. "Gentlemen," Marcus announced, settling into his chair with the contentment of an educator who'd achieved something truly special. "I believe you have some findings to share with the class." Zephron approached the presentation podium with movements that somehow conveyed reverence, as if he were approaching an altar rather than a simple academic exercise. His crystalline form projected holographic displays of ant colony structures with the precision of someone who'd studied every available pixel of data. "Fellow students and esteemed Dr. Webb," he began, his harmonic voice carrying notes of genuine respect. "My research into Earth's social insects has revealed organizational principles that fundamentally challenge our understanding of collective intelligence. The optimization algorithms, demonstrated by a single fire ant colony, exceed the efficiency ratings of our most sophisticated urban planning systems." He gestured to a 3-dimensional map of ant tunnels that looked more like advanced architectural blueprints than animal burrows. "These organisms have solved logistical problems that our civilization required computational matrices to address. They've achieved sustainable resource management, efficient waste disposal, climate control, and defensive coordination through pure biological evolution. Without technology, without external guidance, without what we would recognize as individual consciousness." Marcus nodded approvingly as Zephron continued, his presentation revealing depth of understanding that would have impressed graduate students twice his age. "Most remarkably," Zephron concluded, "their defensive capabilities represent the intersection of chemistry, biology, and tactical coordination in ways that suggest Earth's arthropods should be classified not as primitive organisms, but as highly specialized biological technologies that have been refined through millions of years of practical application." Quilara's presentation focused on chemical communication systems, delivered with the enthusiasm of someone who discovered an entirely new field of study. Her amphibian features animated with excitement as she displayed molecular diagrams that looked like abstract art created by very small, very angry chemists. "The pheromone networks utilized by Earth's social insects," she gurgled, "operate on communication principles that make our telepathic organisms look like beings trying to have a conversation by shouting across continents. The specificity, range, and information density of their chemical signals create communication bandwidth that our most advanced biotechnology cannot replicate." She pulled up comparative data that showed her homeworld's organisms alongside Earth's ants, the contrast stark and humbling. Where our mind-link swimmers require direct neural contact to share complex information, these Earth insects can coordinate colony-wide responses to threats, resource opportunities, and environmental changes through atmospheric chemical releases that function across kilometers and persist for hours. Her voice took on the tone of someone sharing a profound revelation. "They've achieved what our civilization considers advanced telecommunications through evolutionary biology. No external infrastructure, no technological support systems, no maintenance requirements beyond the organisms themselves." Blex's presentation was perhaps the most remarkable transformation of all. His metallic form practically vibrated with enthusiasm as he shared findings that had clearly revolutionized his understanding of defensive systems. The tactical applications of Earth arthropod defense mechanisms, he announced with the excitement of someone who'd discovered fire, represent military engineering principles that our most advanced civilizations have yet to implement effectively. His displays showed bullet ant venom molecular structures alongside comparative analysis of his homeworld's defensive technologies. A single bullet ant carries defensive capabilities that neutralize 3 beings whose species have mastered interstellar travel, electromagnetic manipulation, and telepathic communication. The efficiency ratio is approximately 1 gram of biological material incapacitating several tons of advanced alien physiology. Marcus watched with deep satisfaction as Blex described the strategic implications with genuine respect rather than his former condescension. Most significantly, Blex continued, these organisms have achieved what our military strategists call asymmetric defensive superiority. They can neutralize threats many thousands of times their size and technological sophistication through precisely evolved biochemical delivery systems. It's not primitive, it's the opposite of primitive. It's evolution functioning as an advanced weapons development program with millions of years of field testing. When the presentations concluded, Marcus looked at his 3 students with something approaching pride. They'd started the semester as arrogant tourists slumming through what they'd assumed was a primitive backwater. They were ending it as genuine researchers who discovered that the universe was considerably more complex and humbling than their civilizations had prepared them to understand. Excellent work, all of you, Marcus said, and meant it. I think it's safe to say you've learned something valuable about making assumptions based on insufficient data. Zephron's crystalline structure flickered with what might have been embarrassment. Dr. Webb, I owe you an apology. We arrived here convinced that our advanced civilizations had little to learn from Earth's organisms. We were spectacularly wrong. Spectacularly, Quilara agreed, her amphibian features arranged in what Marcus had learned to recognize as chagrin. The sophistication we dismissed as primitive represents evolutionary solutions to problems our species are still struggling to solve technologically. Blex nodded with mechanical precision. Our homeworld defense councils are now requesting comprehensive studies of Earth's arthropod species for strategic applications. The humble organisms we mocked have become required reading in our military academies. Marcus allowed himself a moment of profound educational satisfaction. In 23 years of teaching, he'd never managed to deliver a lesson quite this memorable. Sometimes the best education came not from textbooks or lectures, but from allowing the universe to demonstrate its principles directly through the medium of very small, very effective teachers with impressive biochemical credentials. Well then, he said, making his final notes in what had become his favorite teaching journal, I'd say this semester has been quite educational. 3 months later, Marcus received a communication from the Galactic Educational Consortium informing him that enrollment applications for Earth's xenobiology program had increased by 400%. Apparently, word had spread throughout the academic community about the remarkable educational opportunities available through hands-on study of terrestrial arthropods. The applications all included detailed requests for safety protocols and comprehensive liability waivers. Marcus smiled as he approved the program expansion. It seemed that the universe had a sense of humor after all, and it had decided that one small blue planet's insects were going to teach the galaxy a thing or two about the dangers of arrogance. He made a note to stock up on medical supplies and to give Dr. Hayes a significant raise. After all, the best education often came with a bit of pain, and Earth's insects were apparently very, very good teachers.